Ladies and gentlemen, one lady here talked about a very important thing. You can of course have wired systems in your home, workplace and so on, but it's a tricky one because you need to have a shielded wire system. Just to have a cable may not do anything or do very little or actually worsen the situation. So when you do operations of technical nature, always make sure to measure and establish. And I know, for instance, in Swedish hospitals, they have personnel that constantly walk around and measure fields so that they don't exceed the allowed levels, because it's so simple, you know. Patient has a relative, so brings a transistor radio, plugs it into the wall, and suddenly the entire hospital will be radio frequent. So you need to be very cautious of what you do, and sort of not just believing, oh, I bought this wire and so on. And also, of course, air tubing to move things away from you could also be a solution, and so on. But I know you are experts on this. I'm just reminding you that you don't have to give up on the internet, for instance. Magda Havas told me yesterday evening, I knew that more than 50% of the connected time on the internet is used for pornography, and often with a violent nature, often against women. She also told me that the highest consumption rate are the office hours. I didn't know the latter, but then people take advantage of their workplace and watch pornography.
People are becoming zombies.
Yeah, they are kind of zombicized, but I am too, because I watch movies myself when I work of the dividing cells. So I got some written questions. I will start with them, and then you can put any question you want to. The first one says, what effect do EMFs have on the bee population and their hives? A very, very important question, and there are some studies that are published also that point to that bees, for instance, they don't like this type of fields, but honestly, these studies are not of the highest quality, and they should be replicated under controlled conditions. And I tried to get that going in Sweden. Unfortunately, no one has been willing to give any funding to it, which I feel is a disaster potentially, because the outcome of these other studies, they are very interesting outcomes. For instance, when they put the cell phone near to a beehive, first the bees went into some kind of drowsing mood. They didn't do very much, and then suddenly they flew off. They swarmed, yeah, and they swarmed and left and never returned. But as I say, there needs to be controlled situations and so on, and they were lacking, and therefore it's hard to draw any far-reaching conclusions. But it needs to be done. Definitely, it needs to be done. How do you get EMFs, radiation, from public transport? I read that as, how do you get away from it in public transport? Also a very important question. In Japan, for instance, you know, Japanese people are very polite, and for many years it was deemed unpolite to talk in cell phones in public transportation because you would disturb your neighbor. But then they went Europeanized or Americanized, or what you should call it. So nowadays it's maybe not fine, but it's all right to use a cell phone. And of course also all the electromagnetic fields from the overhead power lines or undercarriage power lines or whatever. I mean, you have a lot. So it's of course difficult, and it's up to society to come up with solutions for it, to enable electro-hypersensitive people to also use it. That's the good thing to be a scientist. We can just deliver the results and outcome, and it's up to the society to react to it. And I remember I had a discussion with one of the CEOs of Nokia Consumer Electronics, because we received a very prestigious prize from them. And then this CEO said that, you know, we in the industry, when it comes to computer screens, and of course a laptop is slightly smaller than a stationary computer, and then you have tablets, cell phones, but it's exactly the same technology, it's just of different sizes. And he said, we can do anything that society craves or demands for, but since society doesn't ask for anything, we don't do it. So he said, technically, they say we should go a billion times lower, we will. Because the companies that won't, they will not survive on the market. So it's a very simple equation for them. And for instance, when the Swedish trade union TCO, they came up with computer screen labeling, the quality mark, and they reduced the radiation to a certain level. Then Nokia Consumer Electronics said, fine, we can construct such screens, but we don't think it's good with this proposed level. We will go 1,000 times below that. And that's what they did. And therefore they got an enormous profit from gaining shares all over with the low radiation computer screens.
What company?
Nokia in Finland. Yeah. Small company. Now, let's see the next one. Autism, question mark, fetus and women in labor exposed to continuous ultrasound. Well, ultrasound is another form of exposure, and there are studies pointing to that it might not be the very best to subject fetuses to, but at the same time there could be a very good tool to investigate not only pregnant women but also heart problems and so on. So it's always a matter of balancing risk with gain, you know. So it's very difficult to answer, and since we're all adults, I leave to you to decide if you want to subject yourself to such an investigation or not, you know. Wait, I have more questions here on paper. Fetal heart rate increases, output decreases, yes. This may lead to cesarean for distress, does it say that? True. It could start that kind of problem, and the fetuses as well as the newlyborns, they were obviously stressed by the radiation, and even if it doesn't lead to that kind of dramatic changes, it's still how should we say, it points to that the radiation is not good for you. Then I have many questions here. Nikolai Tesla invented free energy. We don't have to irradiate to have communication. I cannot comment upon that because that's outside of my knowledge. What are the tall poles with an eye or camera on top all over the Northern California? You must ask your authorities because they have put them there, but it sounds to be a pole with a camera. And they want to photograph something, and I don't know what.
Everybody.
Yeah, so you just ask them, and you have a Freedom of Information Act here too, so they have to tell you, of course. 5D, why isn't the FCC, US governmental administration, all governments tried in court for forced weapons of mass destruction, murder against the Gogo people, tried by international court and so on? Well, I don't think they want to kill anyone. because a market without customers is not a market. So they definitely don't want to harm anyone in that sense. Maybe they want to control you a little bit or something like that, you know, but they want you to stay alive. And especially with the expanded inclusion criteria for pharmaceutical drugs and medical treatments, they need patience. You have to ask again, do you want to be a consumer of all this, or do you want to make a wake up as a person? But they don't want to kill you. FCC lies, say 5 years safe. I, ex-Verizon lawyer, currently our FCC chairman. Our last Tom Wheeler is insane. I don't know if he's insane, but he was on a video clip at the conference the day before yesterday, I think it was. And I must say, it was like with John Wayne on speed. A very odd character. I would have done his job much better selling 5G to the American population. I think he made a lot of Americans raise their eyebrows, thinking, what? Who is this guy? You know? Because his wording and way of presenting it was pretty infantile, I must say. You know? And if you have that kind of persons up at the top, you must re-elect your representatives. So, media owned by billionaires control negative information about Wi-Fi. Well, that's probably true, but you have to remember the billionaires, they cannot protect themselves with all these lumps of money, so they also want to have safe technologies, and of course, the upside of the coin is that you can come up with tomorrow's human and environmental friendly technology, but you have to rush. The Chinese, the Norwegians, the Malaysians, they are way ahead of you. So you have to ask your industry to come up with solutions before it's too late from a market point of view. No one will buy any products any longer from you, but from Huawei instead. So I think it's very much a self-regulation, and of course no billionaire, and that's very interesting. And for me, you know, when I grew up, I was growing up extremely poor. I didn't understand that because children, they adapt to the environment where they live. I was very happy. My mother and father loved us, and everything was sunshine. That's my view. But later on I realized that we were extremely poor. And then I became a scientist. I got into trouble because no one wanted to fund us. So I had different calls to people, and I met billionaires. And practically they have never given a dime. But the very poor people out there, they give like $1 or $2. They cannot afford to do it, but they still do it. And I remember my mother, for instance, she always gave away money to the missionaries in Africa, although she couldn't afford it actually. So it's an inverse relation. The more money you have, the less you want to spend for others. Greed rather than need, you know.
I have 2 questions if there's time.
Yes, we have until I think 7 o'clock this evening. And then it's room 211 at the hotel. So. And yes, I am single. Yeah.
I don't know if you want to sleep in my car or not. So.
Let's talk about it.
Would you stand up? Stand up.
Yeah, you stand up so I can hear you better.
My first question is, do you recall the image of the 3rd generational mouse, the woefully stunted mouse, by Andrew Marino and Robert Becker?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Okay. Has anything like that kind of science been done to show? Can you equate that to this?
You know, their studies are extremely important and deserves to be replicated. And for those who are not used to scientific vocabulary, when we do things in science, someone comes up with a result, It is published in a peer-reviewed journal. Other scientists look upon the manuscript and decide whether it's good enough for publication or not. But that doesn't mean it comes out as a fact. It needs to be replicated by other scientists, independent scientists, and not only one time, but maybe several times, because the outcome could be different. And that is typically such a result, which is extremely interesting, but needs to be replicated. And I hear that many scientists have a hard time to get funding, and anything you do in life costs money. So they need money, basically. And since their studies may threaten industrial and finance sectors of society, there may be some kind of opposition, I don't know, but maybe there is. So it's very interesting, yes, but we need to do more.
If the NTP rat study, if the rats hadn't been terminated,
Yeah.
and they had been allowed to
Yeah.
procreate
Yeah.
second and third generation,
Yeah.
what would?
Exactly. I mean, that's a typical such an area where you could have gone further. I mean, NGSs, they had $25–30 million in the NTP project, but they would have probably needed $10 or $15 million more than to do that kind of further investigations. And I mean, there are a lot of things like what you bring up. There are obvious question marks and rather easily could be turned into exclamation marks, either saying yes, the first scientist was right, or no, they did something wrong, and therefore we need to put it aside for the time being.
My second question? Okay. Your document on polarization
Yeah,
and the hotspots.
yeah.
If you could speak a bit about that, and perhaps if you want to tie that into climate change or not.
Well, that's a big one. To begin with, artificial electromagnetic fields, they are artificial. And that has a consequence. You remember I said we should have the natural background as the safety level.
Yes.
But that sort of takes into account that we can compare over the line with artificial fields. And we cannot, because they are really artificial. So when people try to creep down on exposure levels, maybe we just had to get rid of all of it. Because, for instance, pulsation, modulation, polarization, and so on are of that artificial nature, so you cannot compare it at all with natural background. The natural background is unpolarized, for instance. And if you don't know what polarization is, then you need to go to Wikipedia or Google or something, you know, and read, because it's rather complicated. But the characteristics of the different rays are very different, and therefore, taking on what you just said, one might have an hypothesis about that you create convergence of different types, making up hotspots that could be the cause or one of the causes of global warming. It's possible, but not readily studied at all. Yeah?
Actually, I have two questions also. First one is about like the idea that we're in a building right now that has Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
This room doesn't have Wi-Fi.
No, right.
Are we still getting Wi-Fi?
Most likely you will pick up Wi-Fi in here anyhow, but it depends on your surrounding neighbors. And I mean, for instance, where I live in my flat, if I allow the computer to look for Wi-Fi, I mean, I have a list that is half a kilometer long. You know? The sources are so many from the neighboring flats, houses, and so on. So most likely, and apart from that, when you remove Wi-Fi, that's good, but you don't remove anything of the other types of irradiations, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10D, and whatever. Yeah.
And the second question is, what can we use to protect ourselves? Like they have these like necklaces that they say are EMF protectors, or you can wear gloves.
Yeah.
Well, what do you know about that?
If we start with things you put on yourself or on your cell phone, like stickers and pendulums and whatever. We have looked into a lot of them, not all, but all of the ones we have looked into, they do not do anything. Nothing. They cost money, they may look nice, but that's it. But there are solutions. I mean, you mentioned gloves, for instance. Of course, if you have a microwave shielding cloth in that frequency domain, you will be shielded, and you can expand that to have an entire costume, or have a canopy over your bed, or over your kitchen, or whatever, or paint your house, etc., etc., etc. Then we eventually will arrive in a society which produces exposures that we all have to protect ourselves from, and then I think it would be cheaper for the citizens to just turn it off. Because these costumes with microwoven cloth, they are very sweaty, warm to wear, and I tried, for instance, the tent that they had put up at the conference yesterday, or the day before yesterday, and it was kind of warm inside that, and it was the size of a small room. And of course, with such, what's the English for that?
Compensation?
No, well, wave traps, you say. Wave traps, they are frequency dependent. So outside of the frequency domain the mesh is made for, you still have a leakage and more leakage. And you want to be really safe, then you need to turn to Germany, because they have these modules that Siemens make. And for a room like this size, it would be in the order of, several $1 million. But then you would be in a zero exposure situation. And if you also want to definitely get rid of the extremely low frequency fields, then you need to build a metal shielding, and a room like this would easily weigh 200 metric tons extra, because that's a real big problem to get rid of. But you can do it. So if you're a millionaire, you can do it. Yeah.
So turmeric is like an anti-inflammatory spice we can take, being that it hurts our cells, breaks it down, inflames them. Should we all be taking turmeric?
And again, when you go to science-based medicine, it's hard to find any supportive evidence for a lot of these different spices and so on, and I don't know too much about it, so maybe you would find for this. But again, we are back in a very odd situation. We need all to be on a special medicine to protect ourselves from our own society. That doesn't sound like a democracy. No. But there are other solutions that might be helpful, and I do not have any shares in this Swedish company, and I am not employed by them, but they have actually a gadget which has impressed on me. They have a case which you put around your smartphone, and it will shockproof it to begin with. In their ads, they allow a Rolls-Royce to run over a cell phone. Nothing happens, you know. So it's very good from that point of view. It makes it fireproof. It's fully recyclable and so on, you know. And it's an aluminum case, and it removes somewhere around 70 to 99% of the radiation, dependent on the make and model. And the name is RP of Sweden, as one name, Radiation Protection of Sweden. And we talk about radiation reduction, and it's impressive to say the least. And remember, they have not done any measurements themselves, but allowed for a Nokia spin-off company in Finland, who are one of the world leading measurements companies, to do that. And therefore they are standing on a very firm ground when they state these reductions. But if that reduction is well enough for health issues or not, no one knows yet. But it's, yeah, but at least it's a start, you know. And again, that's based on school book physics. Nothing sort of strange, no strange pendulum or anything like that, you know. And it does work. So, yeah, let's see now. I think the lady in green was first.
Was that aluminum case just defeat the purpose of a cell phone? Would you still get a cell phone?
No, the connectivity is unharmed and the battery time is the same, so it still works. You have to remember that we had the maximal exposure compared to natural background. That was 10 up to the power 18 times higher. If you reduce it by 99%, you still have 10 up to the power 16 left. So it works, yeah. Sorry, the lady here.
I have two questions. So I was at the conference and extraordinary scientists, brilliant MDs. One of the questions that, and I'm extremely electromagnetic radiation sensitive, that did not come up there, and I've read it from Magda Havas back 12 years ago, when the compact fluorescent lights replaced all the incandescent lights, right? When they were made illegal to go green. So sick. And now the LED lights, of course there's other things going on here, Wi-Fi, your phones are on. That was not addressed, the invisible flicker that the brain reads in the LED lights. So I'm gonna just add the initial part for myself and other people listening to affected. The other thing is, about 12 years ago, I had my home remediated by one of the finest electrical engineers. He now trains the building biologists that do go in the home to make your home free, you know. And I have a plugged in landline, never wireless, etc., etc. Complete total incandescent light bulbs, etc. So my question is, putting those two together. First of all, there was no reference at all to the LED lights, which are in every single building, and also even those that work with a building biologist to have their place, their home, their sanctuary, wherever they're living, totally clean and non-wired. This also didn't come up. Every single building that we go into, even the non-resource center for nonviolence, any restaurant, any classroom, anything is full of the LED lights, etc., in the name of going green, saving the planet, and the flicker, and of course the blue light, the flicker.
The blue light, the flicker, and also they are radio frequent.
Yes.
Most lamps are somewhere between 70 to 120 kilohertz. And so they add on to the soup of irradiation. And
they're everywhere, and yet it wasn't addressed. And, so no matter how clean your personal home is, as well as what one takes care of their bodies.
But you know, when we can travel in time, maybe we should go back and talk to Thomas Alva Edison, because like in Sweden, the introduction of electrical lights have been dramatic in the sense that when, for instance, I was a kid, I was sent away to my grandmother and grandfather on my mother's side, and they were also extremely poor. So in wintertime in Sweden, they would hibernate. They would work a few hours and when it was a little bit light, and then they would rest and sleep the rest of the 24 hours. And in the summertime, the opposite, they would work practically 24/7, and they didn't have any electric lights.
If I just may say, at the important point, and some people are very affected. We're all affected, but symptomatically, even to the electricity. I'm talking now about the artificial CFLs and fluorescent. Now with the LEDs. I'm losing my cognitive capacity. LEDs. So I stockpiled like incandescent lights as they made them illegal. But this is all in the name of going green, and well-meaning citizens all gave away their incandescent bulbs, which at least have a full spectrum and don't flicker.
And
all
up
these
till
things.
now, we don't see any effect on the environment that is positive from these lamps. And I called the 5 biggest providers of electricity in Sweden, and I said, now we have been forced to use these new high-frequency lamps for energy reasons, and I don't see that on my bill. It just increases all the time. So have you lied to me? And 3 of them didn't understand the questions at all. One laughed nervously and said she couldn't take any responsibility. And the 5th got angry and said, are you crazy? Of course it will get higher and higher bills. That's economy. And so I'm not so
medical
impressed.
bills.
Yeah.
Higher medical bills
Yeah,
because they're
yeah.
making people sick.
I'm not so impressed by the introduction of these, and also the leftovers of these lamps are very difficult to take care of, and so they need a new kind of industry sector that has to take care of all these new type lamps.
Can I just hear what the conclusion, what did you recommend us to buy for lighting then?
Old-fashioned incandescent lamps. Yeah.
What about not available?
Amazon.
We can buy them.
Well, you decide. Yeah. If you think they're okay, you buy them.
Well, I'm asking you, from your perspective, how much would that?
Yeah, I wouldn't buy them. I would buy old. Yeah.
You would buy incandescent?
Yeah.
What is dangerous about LED lights?
Um,
How would that harm you? It's just photons. The electromagnetic frequency is just light.
yeah, but many of these lights are radio frequent.
That just means they oscillate at a
Yeah,
radio frequency.
yeah.
It doesn't mean they're irradiating that.
Some of them do.
Oh, they do radio. It's
They're
really-
irradiating.
It's the circuitry. If they use poor quality circuitry,
Yeah.
so they're radio frequency sources.
Dirty electricity.
Strong enough to affect you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can talk about this after. We can talk about this after. I'd be happy to talk
And
to
you
you
know,
about
the
that.
funny thing is that the radio frequent fields, in contrast to the light, will penetrate the walls.
Yeah.
So you can be on the other side and still
Why
feel.
wouldn't it penetrate you?
Oh, it does penetrate me, of course.
But you're saying it interacts with
Yeah, it interacts by
biological-
penetrating. That's the typical nature of radiation.
Yeah.
Radiation is bad for living cells.
Well, it depends on the radiation.
Sorry?
It depends on the radiation.
So far, no one has proven any form of radiation safe, not even white light.
Well, that's why we get sunburns. It's
Yeah,
the same
exactly.
thing.
All
But that's
daylight.
ionizing. You're saying that these waves are non-ionizing. Would you agree that 3G, 4G, 5G, Bluetooth are non-ionizing?
They are non-ionizing, but that doesn't mean that they don't interact with molecules and destroy them.
Yeah. So that's the skin.
Yeah, but you talk about
Images we're showing.
physics at 1 second, and then you move to biology, medicine, and then you have other rules or, you know.
So do you understand the process by which electromagnetic waves interact with the moss cells that you were calling them?
Yeah.
What is that process? How is that happening?
From the science, it looks as if mast cells, which are the outer portion of the immune system, together with so-called dendritic cells and melanocytes, they will in concert react to the outdoor environment, and they will produce pigment as a reaction to radiation, but only within the natural frequency domains. If you irradiate with non-ionizing radiation, you don't get a sunburn, because the cells don't recognize this, and if they do, they will get into a process of high levels of oxidative stress, and that will stepwise interact with the immune system. And so therefore you get the classical radiation damage also from ionizing radiation. As you know, all daylight consuming organisms, and on this planet there are very few of them actually, all of them, they have a skin or a cortex, and in it they have pigment, and the pigment in trees is actually very similar to the pigment of human beings. And that's because white light from the sun is extremely dangerous for living matter, and therefore most creatures on this planet avoid it like a pest. and they live in the night, they live underground, and above all, from 1 meter and deeper in the oceans. Okay, next question. Sorry, yeah.
Yes. I want to thank you, first of all. Fantastic what you've done. And you said how we need to urge our elected officials to serve and protect.
Yeah.
And I want to list a couple of opportunities to do that locally. Tonight is a governing board meeting in Cabrillo College at 6 o'clock. There's a public comment period. They've got cell towers on campus, all Wi-Fi. Urge them to do the right thing. The other is tomorrow. Our Board of Supervisors meets across the street at 901 Ocean Street at 9 a.m. with public comment, and if a handful of people would come here, it's on community TV. I've been trying for about 20 years to direct the Board of Supervisors to remove the cell towers, the Wi-Fi, etc. They don't do it. But it's impressive when more and more people speak. So I want to encourage you to do that. This little paper you got at the bottom gives a list, the time of the Board of Supervisors meeting.
Thank you. I should just comment upon that. I think it's very important what you say, and you need, as you say, to appear over and over again and more people. And I know a lady somewhere in the United States, and every county council meeting, she steps up, you know, and she goes on, and you know, every time, and over and over and over and over again, you know, and she steps up and say, well, hey, you know who I am, but for the protocol, I give the name, address, blah, 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 all of that, you know, and she's fantastic. Yep.
So quite a few of the building biologists say it's
Can you
extremely...
speak up?
Quite a few of the building biologists say it's extremely important to also protect your windows, and that seems to be quite a challenge from the RF.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions?
Well, again, I mean, they have the shielding tools to do it. You can put different forms of screens or cloth. But again, it's coming close to you adopting your life to a society you don't want to have. And you may protect yourself, but the persons that do not react, are they actually in jeopardy? And it's fascinating because it has been discussed a lot in Sweden that tomorrow's big winners may be the extremely poor people on this planet because they cannot afford building infrastructure, buying phones, computers and stuff like that. And maybe they will be the only ones not falling off the...
Power to the poor.
Yeah, exactly, power to the poor, you can say, but you never know. And of course among them would be electro-hypersensitive people, because they would also protect themselves to a high degree. And we will see, of course. So, yeah. The man?
Yeah, so 2 questions. What do you think of DC-based LED lighting? So you remove the radio frequency component, pure DC. I know there's a light spectrum issue.
Yeah.
There's a blue shift.
Yeah.
But in general, that's the first question. What do you think of pure DC LED lighting? And the second would be, as we go from 900 megahertz wireless to 30 gigahertz,
yeah,
what are the health effects do you think we'll start to see?
Well, it's easy to answer both questions in the sense that you need to study it and come up with documentation. And as soon as you do that, we can discuss it further. But you point to one very important thing, which at least in Sweden is very obvious. Many of these new lighting sources from a color temperature point of view are far too white, and it hurts your eyes, yeah, and makes the beautiful Swedish landscape look like a scene from a zombie movie. So it's not very nice from just a landscape architectonical point of view. And also in homes, you are blinded by these very sharp white lights. And then again, you know, the guy who invented the blue diodes, he got the Nobel Prize in physics. Maybe we have to take it off him, you know, because the blue light sector in the white light will keep people much more awake.
Right.
And getting a harder time to sleep. And again, don't think about the health effects, just think about the economical and safety aspects. Tomorrow, when I take the aircraft up to Chicago, do I want to have a flight captain that haven't slept well enough because of the light he has consumed, you know? So there are a lot of issues here. And like in Sweden, more than 1/3 of the population have nowadays serious problems with nighttime sleep. 1/3 and more. Yeah, the man next. Oh, sorry, there. I don't see people. I have lost my glasses. There you are. Sorry, there. Okay. That's a woman.
Yeah, I want to ask this in front of other people because the skin cancer issue and its relationship to electromagnetic fields and wireless fields. I know there has been some research in Sweden now on that. And I'm just, if you can comment on it, because what you're seeing is the same mast cell changes, whether the radiation was caused by nuclear radiation or by wireless.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so there's also the possibility you're seeing the same damage, whether it's caused by solar or wireless or.
Yeah, yeah.
I just comment on that to people because it's relevant here.
Well, but again, you know, as I said before,
Yeah.
if I should sort of try to rank dangers, I would put cancer at the bottom as we know it now,
Yes.
because even as a worst case scenario in Sweden, we are talking about maybe a handful extra cases per year of a very, very rare tumor type in the brain, which even in the worst case scenario still will be very, very rare. And to ask the Swedish society and government to stop milking one of the biggest milk cows ever on the planet because of 3, 4, 5 new patients, no, you cannot do that. And when you look on incidence in Sweden, as I said, it's slightly decreasing. So we are even unsure whether there is any effect whatsoever. And also the American National Toxicology Program, one has to understand that, for instance, the heart tumors, the schwannomas, in the human population are extremely rare, and they don't seem to increase in any way. And the brain tumors, again, they are extremely rare, but sometimes they do increase in populations. I saw one of the speakers showed an increase from 2 cases per 100,000, and after some years they were 5 per 100,000 inhabitants. But that's still extremely rare, so you have to be cautious when you play around with figures. 2 to 5 might sound extreme big change, but in real numbers there are still extremely few. Thank God, no one wants to have a brain tumor, of course. But again, to ask England to stop milking their cow because of 3 extra cases per year per 100,000 inhabitants, no, that's going a little bit too far. But it could change. You know, in 10, 15, 20 years, maybe this are skyrocketing, but we don't see that today. And I think other issues are far more important, because if we manipulate the fertility, we change the pollinating insects or kill them even, you know, and so on, then we don't have any cancer cases to talk about at all, you know. So let's direct the light where it should be, I think.
I just have a 2-part question. For humans, what do you think is the most critical, you know, if it's not cancer, what do you think is the most critical argument for the government that we can raise? And then the second question would be, what do you think about the studies that took place in the late 90s? Series of studies, at least one large published study by, I believe, Harding, possibly, I can't remember his name, but he did find a significantly increased risk of cancer, or at least tumors in the brain using portable phones and cell phones. That was in the late 90s, early 2000s, I forget.
Okay.
Which, around that time. 2-part question.
The second part I don't know very much about, to be honest, but the first part, as I said, things that keep me awake, they are, for instance, the effects on bacteria, the genotoxic effects, the damage to the DNA, that's extremely serious. Effects on insects, effects on plants, because now we are at the very base of life on the planet, and if we lose a few more people at the top in the food chain due to a brain tumor, we can live with that. But if we lose the bacteria or they go against us, no, then there isn't anymore.
So what is the most powerful, besides, for direct effects on humans, direct effects that have been shown by scientific study, what would you say the most serious are of those that we could use as our tools?
Probably behavioral and learning and memory issues, like in schools and pupils. That would be a very strong argument. But of course you have to, this is more of a political question in the sense that you need to ask yourself, what kind of citizens do you want to have here? Down or brilliant? Chinese school authorities seems to have made a choice, as have Uganda, Nigeria and so on. But Sweden is the same, we don't do anything, you know. So, yeah, okay.
I'd just like to answer a couple of things what I saw at the
Can you do it a little louder?
I just wanted to tell you what I saw at the conference this weekend where we attended, and I think there were a lot of medical doctors, which is a very positive development, because there's enough science but not enough medical collective awareness. And one of the biggest consensus that I got from the conference is Neuro Degeneration is one of the primary mechanisms of what's happening to our society, from the children to older people. The increase in neuropsychiatric and neurological diseases has gone up, in especially women, by over 500% over the last 20 years. And the mechanisms for the young people who are very much conversant with this technology is that we have biological windows, so it isn't a matter of intensity only and power density levels, but what biological systems respond to at very low levels. Because if you have the right frequencies at the right power level, you can get biological effects. The biggest effect appears to be, from the consensus of the doctors, that it's through oxidative stress, which is essentially unpaired electrons, which is like rusting. Your body is rusting away, and the brain and the mitochondria, which are very prevalent in the brain, get affected. Which means, exactly as Ollie has said, there are behavioral effects, memory effects, headaches, sleep problems, and we see this universally in our society now. And so, you know, you really, if you want to make an argument, it's not about cancer, because cancer takes 10, 20, 30 years to develop, but all of it comes from inflammation and oxidative stress issues. So you should all treat these devices with great respect, because they do indeed increase a lot of oxidative stress, which leads to lipid peroxidation, or the breakdown of your membranes in your cells, especially in the brain. And therefore, you know, we are doing a huge experiment. And as regards to 5G, we don't really have 5G yet. We have 4G on steroids, which means that they're using new technologies that direct the beams directly to you. They use multiple antenna systems to steer the beams, which means they're going to be directly hitting people. And we're not really going yet in mass to 30 gigahertz or higher. But once we do, there will be a whole bunch of other effects. And because they haven't been studied, we really can't predict. But when I was a military officer, I can tell you they had big biological effects. So if we don't slow down the development, especially putting all these antenna systems, which they basically want to do in order to upgrade things without paying for them, this is the big issue that you're going to be facing in society. They're going to be next to your bedrooms, on utility poles in front of your house. That's the effort we have to slow down. In Australia, they've been able to actually dismantle, because medical doctors have intervened with the lawyers, and they've actually stopped the rollout of this technology. Our doctors, they're talking about it. So I don't think the scientists will ultimately convince politicians. It's going to have to be the medical professionals. And I think that was really positive that we had so many medical professionals, environmental things, because the electromagnetic is also in resonance with all the chemicals in our body. And it was a clear indication that the multiple chemical sensitivity that people have, meaning they're sensitive to all these environmental chemicals, are interacting with the electromagnetics. And so, one of the best things we can say is make sure you clean out your body, detoxify it regularly, and eliminate as much of this radiation out of your environment, especially where you sleep. Okay. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
I could just add to that I've asked people about the Australian concept, and the answers I get tell me a little bit different story. They have been able to stop some of these small cell antennas, yes, but that has only meant they have upgraded the output power of other base stations, so you do not have any gaps anywhere. And for instance, in Sweden, all the police, fire brigade, ambulances and so on, they use 3, 4 and 5G, and there is not allowed to be any gaps whatsoever. That doesn't mean that people are not successful in moving antennas away, but the microwaves are still there. So I think it's important to validate through measurements that they really succeeded in stopping the exposure, which I doubt.
We have 5 minutes left, so if we want everyone's question to be answered, quick fire question.
One more question from our host.
One sentence.
Yeah.
And I've got a question too when you get a chance, but.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I live in San Joaquin County, many farms and orchards that are feeding our nation. And is that food, the fruits and vegetables that are grown there, being affected by these towers and antennas or whatever is surrounding them? Is it penetrating into our food in some way, detrimentally?
I'm not aware of any such big-scale studies, but most likely from the kind of observations done by scientists in laboratory experiments, it's fair to assume that things are going on. And in what way, I don't know. But I mean, you have other issues here which are quite alarming. You know that all the pollinating honeybees in the United States are nowadays imported from Europe, and they are depending on genetic material from only 200 queens. So you have lost the pollinators, and you need to import them, and they are transported around the country on big lorries in boxes and released and collected, and they are produced in Croatia in Europe and flown in aircraft here. And if they didn't, you would have to do what they do in China. You know, China has a tougher government, so they just forces people out with handheld brushes to pollinate.
Oh my.
Yeah, so that's what they need to do. But of course then also the outcome, the product as such, if that is detrimentally impaired by the irradiation from towers and so on, I don't know. But it would be fair to assume that. And I don't know in the United States, but in like Sweden, imported products nowadays, like from Spain and so on, they are utterly bad. They only taste water, you know, tomatoes, apples and so on. So homegrown apple or tomato, that's fantastic. And I remember when I came to one of my favorite countries, which doesn't exist any longer, East Germany. You know, East Germany, they stopped their country in 1949, and that was bad. But not only bad, because they also stopped their agriculture at that level. So when I came there, I remember the first evening, I got a dinner consisting of nearly only potatoes. Wow, those potatoes, you know. And I realized I have tasted this before. Yeah, when I was a kid in the 50s in Sweden. But you cannot get a potato like that any longer. If you don't homegrown it. And you know, Monsanto and all these, they want to sort of diminish the number of seeds and crops and whatever. So there is war going on many levels. Now it's your turn.
Okay, thank you. And if you have a burning question you need to answer right now,
I would
please try and hold your questions after. You can talk to Olle afterwards. We're wrapping, so we need to be out of this room completely by 1:30.
Yeah, we can be out.
Yeah. So my question is, there are several organizations who are promoting the idea of safe wireless, or training people how to use wireless safely.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, in your opinion, are these organizations being honest based on the science? And are they moving us marginally toward a solution? Or is this red herring? Distraction.
If I answer that, maybe I have to run down the street with a lot of people after me with clubs and bats and whatever. Yeah. I don't think they actively mean to lure anyone, but of course you have to again think about the English language. For me, it's a difference between safe and safer, and anything you do will make it safer, like 100%, but the question is, where is your end point? And very often when I meet activists and campaigners or whatever you call yourself, I lack a defined end point. Where do you actually want to go? And when I ask people, it turns out they want something else and the organization they belong to is advocating. And so I think there is a number of things to be addressed. And with the science of today, I think you need to be more dramatic in what you ask for. But it depends on what you want to. If you want, as I said in my introduction, to wake up, for instance, as patients, I will respect that. But when I come back to Sweden, I want to wake up as a person. And I want to have a society which is safe, not safer. I cannot even understand the latter word, really. But you make up your mind, and I respect it. You know, I sit safe in Sweden, so that's all right. No more questions.
Thank you.
I think we'll have to cut it off
If you don't know what the precautionary principle is, it tells our government, prove it's safe before you roll it out. So know the precautionary principle.